What's up, guys, and welcome back to INTHESHOPTV. This is going to be video number 3 of our budget rear end assembly video series. Guys, if you haven't seen the previous 2 videos, there's going to be a link in the description to go click on them so you can catch up to speed with where we're at right now. In the first video, we got it out of the car, we welded on some axle brackets for our 4-link. In the second video, we cleaned it all up, wire wheeled everything down, got it pretty much almost down to bare metal, primed it, then we got it coated with a nice gloss black paint. Today's video is going to be a lot more fun, for me anyway, because I like bolting stuff on, putting stuff together, building stuff a lot more than I like cleaning stuff and grinding and taking things apart. So today, we gotta clean off our mating surface for our differential cover. We've gotta put in bearings, we gotta put in seals, put our axle shafts on, we gotta put backing plates on, calipers, rotors, pads, you name it. Arguably, the least fun part of this is gonna be cleaning the gasket surface off of this, and the most boring part. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and tackle that first. So it's pretty clean and debris free in here, as you guys can see. However, the gasket surface is in really crappy condition. I gotta clean all that old RTV off of there, get it ready for mating with a new differential cover. So I wanna keep stuff out of the tubes, so I guess I'll put some rags in there. So maybe I'll just stuff some brown paper or something in here just to keep all this crap from getting flung in here while we're trying to clean it up. So I didn't have any brown paper. I thought I had some packing paper around here, but I just used some good old Amazon plastic stuff in there. I think it'll keep it well enough protected for now. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and use one of these roll-lock pads. I've been pretty good at removing paint and rust when I was doing the axle tubes. So I'm gonna go ahead and try it on this gasket surface and see how well it cleans it up. I don't know about you guys, but I'd say that's pretty damn good. I can definitely live with that. So there is some scratches you can see here, and I'm gonna assume that at some point in the life of this thing, a tech, stuck a pry bar or a screwdriver in here and tried to peel off the cover and made those gouges. So I am gonna be using RTV when I put a new cover on instead of just using a gasket, because I wanna be able to seal those up good. All right, so we're gonna enter my big old jumbo box of parts that I have for this rear end. Grab our bearings and seals. All right, so I'm gonna be using a number 5 driver here, and it fits just a hair small of the overall diameter of the bearing, which is good because this is a super tight press fit inside that axle tube. So I'm gonna use just the tiniest little bit of white lithium grease on my finger and just kind of lubricate the inner tube here where the bearing slides in. Just, like I said, it's a really tight fit. It's just gonna be, not a lot, just a tiny little film on there. So now I'm just placing my bearing in place to make sure I have it square as possible, so when I start banging it, it goes in straight. One concern I have is that it's just sitting on jack stands, and if I have to pound too hard, it might start sliding the tube that way, so I might have to straddle this thing, but we'll see how it goes. Kind of heard it change pitch right there, which means it bottomed out, so that worked out pretty good. So now I'm going to take just a tiniest little bit of gear oil that we're going to use in our rear end and get it on the bearing surface. Squeeze a little bit in there. I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit by rolling it around. Just a little bit more. Go ahead and clean out this surface right here just in case there's any gear oil. This next step is not at all necessary. You do not have to do this, so don't copy me if you don't want to. I put a tiniest smear of RTV. Specifically, it's called the right stuff. That's what I used on the corners of my oil pan. You don't have to do this at all. It's just a peace of mind. And I also think it kind of helps it slide in there just a bit easier. So I went ahead and repeated the same thing on the other side as well. One thing to note, I've seen a lot of comments where people say you shouldn't bang the seal, the grease seal, all the way in because then it makes it hard to get out. There's kind of a U-shaped lip on it, so if you have a bearing puller, or not even the slide hammer type, but the one that has like a hook and you just kind of use the flange for leverage and crank it out, it'll just catch that and rip it right out anyway. So I don't really subscribe to that. I like to have a nice flat seal against it. I'm not saying people are wrong for not pushing them all the way in, but I've never seen the need to do that. All right, so I have our backing plates here. These are kind of neat. They have an internal brake drum shoe that goes inside the rotor hat. And let me slip this over the flange and I'll talk a little bit more about it. All right, so our backing plates are on. Just goes 4 bolts and nuts on the axle flange. I put a little bit of orange Loctite. I like to use that stuff a lot when there's not any spring washers or lock nuts or anything like that. It just gives a little extra peace of mind, and it will break free if you need it to. What I like about these over the OEM ones that came with the late 90s Explorers on this 8.8 is these dust shields. I'm not really a fan of dust shields on hot rods and stuff like that because they're kind of ugly. The original ones came up higher, or came out, had like a large diameter, and then they had a lip that comes out this way, and the rotor was kind of inset to the backing plate. So you kind of saw the backing plate around the rotor, which I really didn't like. I think it was probably, you know, better in terms of keeping dust off of the rear end and around components and stuff. But obviously for a build like this, that's not really very important to me. So these will actually be hidden by the rotor face, and you won't see these backing plates at all, which is something I'm really into. So I'm really a lot happier with this improved design on these aftermarket backing plates. It has a cast caliper bracket that gets bolted on behind it. And then this is our drum shoe. This is for the emergency brake. And these kind of fit inside the rotor hat, which we'll get to in a little bit. So it's time to start getting our old carrier placed back in here. Yes, I know everyone uses a brand new carrier and sets backlash when they do a rear axle. No, I don't care. I will be putting the old one back in here. It's in really good shape. And this is a budget rebuild. Taking a little bit of the gear oil right now and just pre-lubing the bearing surfaces. Some people will use axle grease for this. I don't like to do that. I like to use only what goes in here and lubes this as it's running. But I suppose if you have the grease that's meant for this, it's okay. All right, so I placed my carrier back in. It's a little bit difficult because you have bearings that go on the outer races here, and you have these shims that get tucked in behind them, and my hands are full, and I forgot to hit record, so I'm just setting this last little shim right now. All right, hardly any backlash at all anyway. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a little more gear oil and lubricate these bearing surfaces. All All right, so I'm getting these bearing caps placed back on. What I'm gonna do is just lubricate the inside of it with some gear oil. But there's a lot of confusion with these. If you ever get them mixed up and you don't remember what side they go on, people like it's impossible, you can't figure it out. There's a really easy way to tell, okay? If you look right here, there's a little bit of a bevel. I don't know if you guys can see that. See that bevel right there? Well, if you look down here, right at that mounting surface, there's a bevel right there as well. That's exactly where that goes. There's no other place it goes. If you look at this side, it doesn't have that bevel, doesn't have it up at the top on the other side over there, doesn't even have it on the top of the passenger side over here. So you know right off the bat that that's where that's gonna go. So I'm going to do my best to install this C-clip with the camera right in front of my face. I can't even really see what I'm doing, but I'm trying to catch it for you guys. It's a little bit tricky. You got to push the axle in, slide this in there, and then pull the axle back while still holding it. Otherwise, it kind of falls in there into the netherworlds, and it's really a pain in the ass to get it back. So some people use a magnet. Mine is a little bit large. I'm going to use my fingers and hope for the best. I just pulled it back, and there we go, we captured it. We'll see if you guys can see it. They're both tucked in there nice. So we're gonna rotate the carrier, and there's a pin that slides down that hole, and that basically holds, you know, the pressure from that pin holds both axles firmly in that way so the C-clips don't fall out. So I'm gonna take a little bit more of our gear oil. That coated nicely. So one thing I forgot to show you guys on camera was that I torqued these down, and the torque the torque specs for these bolts are 80 foot-pounds. It's kind of confusing. It says somewhere between 75 and 95, depending on what manual and what publication you read. So I'm just going with 80. That seems to be the general consensus on these. So torqued them down, those are good to go. I think we're all set in here. We got to get our differential cover on. We got to do a little RTV former gasket, put our new cover on, and then we just start moving over to brakes. All right, so I'm gonna give this cover surface a little final wipe down. And I'm gonna do the same thing to the new cover that we got. Got a chrome cover here. I wasn't planning on using chrome at all, but I got an incredible deal on it, and it's a Yukon cover, which is really well made and heavy. Next, I'm going to go ahead and pre-fill. I'm using 75-140. I believe Ford went to this in later years. It has the friction modifier in it, so you don't have to add any of that. I've always been a Valvoline fan myself, so I'm going to go ahead and Pre-fill this because I just feel it's going to be easier than using the hole in the top and letting it all dribble all over the place. So I got a little carried away here and I decided to clean up the original differential tag. Shows that we got 373 gears there. Figured why not? All right, so differential cover is on. I pre-filled it with 2 quarts. It takes about 2.5 to 3 quarts for this 8.8. I didn't want to fill it to capacity because you don't really know exactly what capacity is. It could be anywhere in between there. So what I did was put 2 quarts in to pre-fill it, and then once it's on level ground and kind of installed in the vehicle, we'll take the fill plug out and fill it with that final quart, and as soon as it starts to dribble out, that's the exact amount of fluid that you need. All right, so we're nearing the end. Time to get some brakes on this thing. So we're using a drilled and slotted rotor. They came pre-marked over here which side they go on. They came with this nice zinc coating on them. Of course, that will wear off once it starts some actual braking, but it's nice that the hat part of the rotor actually has it coated on there because that will last a bit longer. One nice thing about zinc coated rotors is that when you're building a car or a truck like this that's gonna sit for who knows how long until it's done, you know, a plain steel rotor will just rust just because of the moisture in the air, whereas these will stay nice and new looking for a while. All right, so our rotor is on. You have to kind of manipulate those brake shoes to get them to close up. And they kind of slide in place on that backing plate. So you just got to kind of get them in place and the rotor slips right on. I'm gonna use a spacer right here and just a lug nut so I can true up this rotor for installing our caliper. It'll sit nice and straight. Okay, so with these caliper brackets, you have these beveled ends here, and you have to put these sliders on over them, and it requires you to lube up the ends with some grease. Careful not to get that on the rotor itself. Once you get them in place, you just kind of lightly tap them down. So here's our caliper and pad. Pad has kind of this alien looking claw on the back of it, which just kind of slips inside the piston right there. Anyway, just slips in there. Same thing with the outer pad. Just has this kind of spring retainer here. Slide it right in and it grabs, and there's your assembled caliper. Position your caliper on top here and then use tabs to slide down right on top of our sliders that we greased up. These sliders push in to meet with the caliper bracket. Here's our bolts to put a little bit of anti-seize on the end of them. Doesn't matter if you don't touch it, it still gets on your fingers. I don't know how, but it just does. All right, one side down. Obviously, I'm gonna go ahead and the next side, complete all the same steps. All right, so we're completely rebuilt. And in case you guys are wondering, that rear end was out of a 96 Ford Explorer. So we went with the same exact brakes that would be for a 96 Ford Explorer. I know that they make a Willwood conversion kit if you guys want to go with like upgraded brakes like Willwood. It's called a Dynalite, and they do make them for the 8.8. They're kind of pricey. I think last time I checked, they're about 1,200 bucks. This is about 162 for everything, so kind of a no-brainer. This is not a sports build. This is not a high-performance build. We have about a 420 horsepower motor in here. It's going to be light. It's going to be quick, but it's just meant to be a cruiser, guys. So we're not getting carried away with $1,200 brakes. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this rear end build. I hope you guys enjoyed this 3-part series. Please like, comment, subscribe. If you guys aren't already subscribed, please do so. I really need the help. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thanks.